Challenge rating is a simple metric by which you can easily judge how tough an encounter will be for a party. For example, a challenge rating of 5 is considered a normal encounter for a party of 4 level 5 adventurers. In this video, we've gone over monsters that are much deadlier than their challenge rating suggests and can pose a significant challenge for players. Starting off at number 10, we have the Night Hag. These are CR5 fiend monsters that are incredibly tanky, sporting 112 hit points on average with an AC of 17, along with some very important damage resistances to cold and fire damage, as well as non-magical, non-silvered weapons. This means that the average level 5 party will have a hard time taking down a single Night Hag. But the most dangerous thing about the Night Hag is its ability to escape danger with their etherealness ability. Night Hags can use this ability to enter the ethereal plane, making them untouchable by creatures who can't enter it. This allows the Night Hag to move in and out of combat, casting spells like Magic Missile and Sleep, and picking apart players who aren't ready for tricks. Being so hard to deal with means that players might not be able to finish off a Night Hag at all, leaving it to stalk them for another plane if the tides turn against the Hag. The next time players take a rest, she can swoop in, then use her incredibly deadly Nightmare Haunting ability. This causes the target creature to lose 1d10 maximum hit points, which can only be healed by a greater restoration spell, which is not something level 5 players would have access to yet, as the earliest it can be learned is at level 9. The real kicker about this ability is that the Hag gets to use this from the safety of the ethereal plane, letting her slowly drain players every time they rest until they figure out a way to deal with her. Night Hags become even more dangerous in groups when they form covens and gain access to more dangerous spells, like Eye Bite, Polymorph, and Lightning Bolt. These fiendish abilities make Night Hags some of the most dangerous monsters to encounter for low-level parties. The only thing Night Hags really lack is a high damage ability, otherwise it would be much higher on this list. But as most of the spells are control-oriented, she only takes the number 10 spot on this list instead. And at number 9, we have the Ropers. These are CR5 monstrosities with 93 hit points on average, and a whopping 20 AC, making them pretty hard to hit for even level 5 characters and up. What makes the Roper dangerous isn't just its high AC, but its ability to be near imperceivable with its false appearance ability. This allows it to appear as a harmless K formation until it launches a surprise attack on an unsuspecting party member, typically from the ceiling at a great distance, making it even harder to deal with. The Roper's most deadly offensive ability is its Tendril attack, which can reach up to 50 feet and, on a successful hit, immediately grapples and restrains the target. The target also has disadvantage on strength checks, making the use of athletics to break the grapple significantly harder for strength-based characters. And it can make up to 4 tendril attacks in one turn, potentially restraining the entire party in a single turn, then immediately reeling them up to 25 feet. This makes even escaping a dangerous ordeal, as players risk suffering fall damage after spending their entire turn trying to break free. And if they don't break free, they'll eventually get reeled into the Roper's high damaging bite attack, which will attack at advantage thanks to the tendrils restraining the player, and the bite hits for 4d8 plus 4 piercing damage. They also have 60 feet of dark vision, making them extremely capable in dark caves where players who don't have dark vision might struggle. Ropers are incredibly dangerous in their habitats and can pose quite a difficult challenge for unprepared parties. So, when adventuring in caves, always watch out for stalactites that start wiggling. Next up at number 8 on this list is a lower CR monster, the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblins are CR 1/2 creatures, and when it comes to fractional CRs, it means against a level 1 party, you can throw 2 of them at them. So it's expected for there to be at least 2 Hobgoblins in an encounter. Despite their low hit points at 11, Hobgoblins sport a very high 18 AC. This means that low-level characters will struggle to successfully hit them, even if they will only go down in 2 to 3 hits. And with the lack of reliable saving throw spells at such low levels, a few Hobgoblins can be quite a deadly encounter for a level-appropriate party to attempt. What makes them extremely dangerous is their special ability called Martial Advantage. Martial Advantage works similar to a rogue sneak attack ability. Once per turn, the Hobgoblin can deal an extra 2d6 damage to a creature it hits, provided there is an ally of the Hobgoblin within 5 feet of the creature. Which means that with its longsword attack, if it used 2 hands, the Hobgoblin can do 2d6 plus 1d10 plus 1 slashing damage in a single hit, which on average will do 14 damage. This means that classes with less than a d10 as their hit die could easily be knocked unconscious in a single hit. And even the classes with a d10 hit die, unless they start the game with an 18 in Constitution, they would still have less than 14 hit points at level 1. Barbarians have the best chance to live, as their hit die is a d12, and if they have an 18 Constitution on top of that, they'd start with 16 hit points. But with this, it's still versus the average damage roll. If the Hobgoblin rolls the maximum damage of 23 with his attack, it can outright kill any character with less than 12 hit points. And a wizard who, with Tasha's custom lineage, started with a Constitution score of 20, would still only have 11 HP at level 1. So because of how deadly this creature is when pitted against low-level players, it takes a spot on this list. but a lower spot as the rest of this list has some horrifying creatures. In that same vein, at number 7, we have the Firenewt Warrior. It has the same CR as the Hobgoblin at 1/2, but is arguably tougher to deal with thanks to its 22 hit points and 16 AC. While its AC is lower than the Hobgoblin's, 16 is still very good for its CR. But the 22 HP is what really makes this guy a contender, as that is twice what the Goblin has, and going from 3 hits max to take down the Hobgoblin all the way to now you're looking at more than 4 to 5, meaning they can realistically survive a round of attacks from the party. They don't have quite the damage capability of the Hobgoblins, as their attacks aren't as strong as Martial Advantage. Their Bolty attack allows them to make 2 Scimitar attacks for 1d6 plus 1 slashing damage each, which is 2 more than Martial Advantage before you add in the Hobgoblin's Longsword attack. That said, the Firenewt does have some guaranteed damage in the form of their Spitfire ability. Once per short or long rest, a Firenewt Warrior can use this to spit a gout of fire at an enemy for 2d8 fire damage on a failed dexterity saving throw, or a half damage on a success. While the DC isn't high at only 11, the important part is that the Firenewt Warrior is guaranteed at least half damage with the ability, which can hit from range, though only 10 feet. Since a normal encounter for even a level 1 party is at least 2 of these creatures, they could immediately down a level 1 character with their Fire Spit if they failed one of the saves, assuming average damage. Guaranteed damage combined with some decent HP makes the Firenewt Warrior a deceptively intense challenge for low-level parties, especially level 1 parties who would be the most likely characters to take on such low CR monsters. Even higher level characters encountering large groups of Firenewt Warriors for an appropriate CR challenge would struggle to fend off a flurry of Fire Spit attacks doing damage to any character who doesn't have resistance or evasion. A lesser note, but one that must be included, is the fact that the Firenewt Warrior also has immunity to fire damage, which means that at low levels, cantrips like Create Bonfire and Firebolt won't help you against them. And when facing hordes of them at higher levels, you can't just throw out a fireball to wipe them out. Due to the added threat from the Spitfire and the significant HP bump, the Firenewt Warrior does just edge out the Goblin for the number 7 spot on this list. And at number 6, we have the Ghost. Ghosts are CR4 undead monsters with 45 hit points and 11 AC. This is all fairly low for CR4. While they do have a list of nice resistances and immunities to make up for it, its defensive stats aren't what make it a threat. The real danger of the Ghost is in its possession ability. The Ghost forces a creature you can see within 5 feet to make a charisma saving throw or be possessed. This incapacitates the target and gives the Ghost control over its body. It also makes the Ghost untargetable by all abilities except ones that turn undead. Once possessed, the only way to make the Ghost leave the possessed creature is by its own will, knocking the possessed character to 0 hit points, or casting the 5th level spell Dispel Evil and Good. And you don't gain access to 5th level spells until level 9, so a level 4 party going up against a Ghost would have no other choice but to knock their friend unconscious unless they can afford a pricey spell scroll. This can lead to a dangerous spiral where the Ghost keeps possessing new targets over and over, forcing a party to fight its own members, as the only way to get it out is to knock their own allies unconscious. And this strategy is super effective, as your fighters and barbarians who have the highest HP will often need to dump charisma for strength, dexterity, and constitution, leaving them as easy pickings for the Ghost. Even once the Ghost is out, it can shift into the ethereal plane, just like the Night Hag, so it can't be targeted or attacked. It can also ambush very effectively thanks to its incorporeal movement, which allows it to pass through solid objects. And while it doesn't affect combat as much, perhaps the scariest part of the Ghost is its horrifying Visage ability, which lets it magically age every non-undead creature within 60 feet of it by 1d4 times 10 years, if they fail the DC 13 Wisdom save by 5 or more. Because you see, this aging requires a cast of Greater Restoration to reverse, and if not reversed within 24 hours, it becomes permanent. If you're playing a young character, this might not matter, but if your character is older, or you're part of a shorter-lived species, this could theoretically be deadly. This ability is a holdover from the earlier editions in which undead were much scarier than they are now in 5th edition. And if you want to learn more about that, you can check out What They Don't Tell You About Undeads over on Mr. Rex's channel. All of this amounts to a low CR monster that can easily wipe a party with a bit of bad luck. And at number 5, we have the Intellect Devourer. An Intellect Devourer is a CR2 aberration with only 21 hit points and 12 AC. But much like the Ghost, what they lack in defense, they make up for their dangerous capabilities to instantly incapacitate and then kill characters, particularly those with low intelligence, thanks to their Devour Intellect and Body Thief abilities. Devour Intellect forces a creature to make an intelligence saving throw or take 2d10 psychic damage. Not that deadly on its own, but if a creature fails, you roll 3d6. If that total equals or exceeds the target's intelligence score, the target's intelligence becomes 0 and they're stunned until they regain 1 point of intelligence. Wizards and Artificers are the only classes that use intelligence as their primary stat, And as the abilities that require intelligence don't come up too much, most characters use intelligence as a dump stat, favoring their primary stat, then constitution, charisma, or dexterity, wisdom, then tied for last, intelligence and strength. This leaves the other classes incredibly susceptible to this ability. Only things like Greater Restoration can cure ability score reductions, which is something a party of level 2 adventurers won't have for another 7 levels. It can further take advantage of the stunned targets by stealing the body of the incapacitated target after an opposed intelligence check with its body thief ability, something that would be trivial against a target whose intelligence has been reduced to 0. This lets the Intellect Devourer magically consume the target's brain, enter their body, and use the target's body against its allies. This is similar to the Ghost with their possession ability, but with much more dire consequences, as even if it's forced out by having the player's body be reduced to 0 hit points, the body dies within 1 round unless its brain is somehow restored by high-level magic. Considering most classes don't have a reason to increase their intelligence at this level, Intellect Devourers remain potent threats to most players well beyond the early levels of the game, and even a single one ambush in a high-level party can be disastrous. And because of that, it takes the number 5 spot on this list. It might have gotten a higher spot, but it's fairly squishy, and thanks to its low AC, as long as it doesn't ambush you, it's most likely dealt with within a single round of combat, even by a level 2 party. And at number 4, we have the Bodak. These are CR 6 undead creatures which have relatively weak stats for the CR with only 58 hit points and 15 AC. Though it does have a number of useful resistances and immunities to increase its durability. But like the previous 2 entries, it makes up for those low stats with its 2 unique abilities. These are called Aura of Annihilation and Death Gaze. Aura of Annihilation is a passive effect that deals 5 necrotic damage to any creature that ends its turn within 30 feet of the Bodak. This means, against a regular party of 4 characters, a Bodak can be dealing 20 damage a turn without ever having to use an action. Death Gaze requires a creature that starts their turn within 30 feet of the Bodak to avert their gaze or be forced to make a Constitution saving throw, and if they fail, they take 3d10 psychic damage, or if it fails by more than 5, the creature immediately is reduced to 0 hit points, as long as they aren't immune to the frightened condition. This is extremely dangerous, as the Aura of Annihilation will make creatures at 0 hit points start immediately failing death saves because of the automatic damage. While you can avert your gaze from the Bodak to avoid the Death Gaze, it comes at the cost of having disadvantage on attack rolls against the Bodak until the start of its next turn. And this would presumably mean that spellcasters in the area of effect wouldn't be able to use this spell that requires line of sight either. So the victims either suffer potentially deadly consequences or severely handicap themselves while Aura of Annihilation wears them down. The only reason the Bodak isn't even higher on this list is because it's still vulnerable to ranged characters, as its most dangerous abilities are limited to a 30-foot area around it, and because paladins and clerics have potent offensive options against corporeal undead. But if your party ever encounters a Bodak in an enclosed space, they might be in for a very unpleasant time. And at number 3, we have the notorious Mind Flayer. These are CR 7 aberrations with 71 hit points and 15 AC. The main thing that makes the Mind Flayer such an intimidating monster is in its ability to use its Mind Blast, which in a 60-foot cone causes every creature to make an intelligence saving throw or take 48 plus 4 psychic damage and be stunned for a full minute. Creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of the next turn, and they still lose that turn because of how crippling the stun condition is. This is basically an area of effect version of the Intellect Devourer's Devour Intellect ability, crippling an entire party if they fail their intelligence saves. But Mind Flayers are also deadly in regular combat, as their tentacle attack does a respectable 2d10 plus 4 psychic damage and grapples the target on hit, forcing the creature to make an intelligence saving throw or be stunned until the grapple ends. So players aren't safe in melee either. This fulfills the condition for the Mind Flayer's most deadly ability, Extract Brain. The Mind Flayer can attack and incapacitate a humanoid it has grappled and deal an enormous 10d10 psychic damage. And if the damage drops the target to 0 hit points, the target immediately dies to having his brain extracted from its skull and eaten by the Mind Flayer. This combination of abilities allows a single Mind Flayer to incapacitate and potentially immediately kill players with relative ease. If that wasn't enough, Mind Flayers also have an arcane spellcaster variant called the Mind Flayer Arcanist, which can do everything the normal Mind Flayer can in addition to casting a handful of spells, most notably Wall of Force, Shield, Invisibility, Confusion, and Hallucinatory Terrain. Though this does increase its CR by 1 up to CR 8, which is still ridiculous. Mind Flayers are notorious for TPKs because they target the save that is typically the weakest against players, and makes failed saves quite lethal. Slotted in at number 2 is the Beholder. These are CR 13 aberrations and remain one of the most recognizable Dungeons & Dragons monsters due to its striking design. The most dangerous aspect of the Beholder is the many rays that it fires from its eye stalks. On its turn, it can fire 3 random rays at any target with a wide range of dangerous effects. Its eye beam can charm, fear, slow, put to sleep, and even petrify targets. The most deadly rays, though, are the incredibly high damaging disintegration and death rays. The disintegration ray forces dexterity save or taking 10d8 force damage, and if it reduces the target to 0 hit points, they're disintegrated into a pile of dust, making healing and most resurrection useless. The death ray works similarly, dealing even more damage with 10d10 necrotic damage, and while it doesn't disintegrate the body, it does still automatically kill a target it drops to 0, making healing useless. If all that wasn't scary enough, the Beholder has a fly speed of 20 feet, with a hover meaning that it can't be knocked out of the air while allowing it to remain forever out of melee range. Also, it can just delete magic as its main eye functions like an anti-magic field spell, but up to a 150-foot cone, and it can move the cone at the start of each of its turns, or deactivate it completely if it so chooses. Luckily for an adventurer, the anti-magic cone also renders the Beholder's own eye rays inert, as they too are magical. In addition to all of that, the Beholder has 3 legendary accents which it can use to fire off an additional eye ray at the end of another creature's turn, and it even has layer actions if you're fighting it while it's in its lair. However, that does increase its CR to 14. While you would encounter Beholders much later in the game than most of the other creatures on this list, even running into it at level 13, it will still be rough to beat, which is fitting given it's probably the second most iconic monster in the game. The only thing truly holding the Beholder back from being unstoppably deadly in most scenarios is that the rays it fires are decided randomly, meaning luck of the dice will decide just how deadly or not the Beholder ends up being. But luck is not a problem at all for the final spot on this list. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the most iconic creatures in Dungeons & Dragons, the dragons. These range all the way from CR1 Wyrmlings up to CR24 Ancient Dragons and beyond. What makes these the most dangerous monsters in the game is that, at nearly every level of play, there's an incredibly deadly, level-appropriate dragon with a decent fly speed and a breath weapon that can easily take down an entire party in a single action while also being incredibly resilient. As an example, a CR2 Black Dragon Wyrmling has a ridiculous 33 hit points and 17 AC, and with its breath weapon averaging 22 acid damage on a failed saving throw, more than enough to down most level 2 characters in a single blast. And it's AoE, so it can hit multiple targets. Every kind of dragon follows this pattern of high damage, high hit points, and high AC as you further climb in levels. And they get even more powerful by gaining new abilities, such as legendary actions, legendary resistances, more attacks, alternative crowd control breath weapons, super senses like blind sight. Any enemy with flight and ranged attack options can pose a significant problem for even a well-prepared party. But dragons take this combination to the extreme. Few monsters are harder to beat than a dragon with an open sky. While there may be legendary monsters that, on their own, are more powerful than any individual dragon, no other kind of creature is so deadly at all levels of play. If you broke them up individually, you could have 40 different distinctly deadly monsters at various CR levels, which is why they have to take the top spot on this list. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other extremely deadly monsters that we may have missed? Or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, I'd love to hear about those things down in the comments.